Samuel Clemens, who wrote Mark Twain, somebody wrote his obituary before he died. And so in his immortal words, the rumors of my resignation are greatly exaggerated. So you're going to have me for a bit longer. Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. As anxious as I am to begin my 10th SEC football season on the heels of 5 consecutive national championships, to brag about winning 7 national championships this year alone, bookended by championships in football and baseball for the 3rd consecutive year, and to tell you about the academic successes of student athletes like Greg McElroy and Derek Sherrod. I'm not going to do that. As we look forward to the upcoming season, as anxious as we are and as excited as we don't have the luxury of acting as if it's business as usual. And that's been made clear by the headlines emanating from the Atlantic to the Pacific and from the Gulf to the Great Lakes. As NCAA President Mark Emmert has observed, the events giving rise to these headlines indicate that intercollegiate athletics has lost the benefit of the doubt. To the extent that that reality exists, it casts a shadow over the extraordinary achievements of student athletes throughout this country, as well as over the value of intercollegiate athletic competition at a time when student athletes are graduating at a higher rate than ever before, and at a time when we are providing men and women with more opportunity to learn, to grow, and to compete than ever before. For the past 30 years, we have seen reform efforts come and go, while the NCAA manual continues to grow in size and in complexity. Too many of our student athletes still come to us ill-prepared academically. NCAA and conference revenues continue to increase. Coaches' compensation continues to grow. And highly publicized infractions cases have increased the level of scrutiny placed on this uniquely and wonderful American combination of athletic competition and higher education. With that as a backdrop, and in an effort to support and follow up on some of President Mark Emmert's initiatives, we have developed an agenda that is intended to stimulate a national discussion, an agenda for change, if you will, with the hope that we will see significant action in the foreseeable future. This agenda is not a panacea, nor is it intended to offer a solution to every problem. It does, however, identify several key issues we believe need attention, including many of the matters you have written about these past months. 4 primary areas form the basis of this agenda. Redefine the benefits available to our student athletes. Strengthen academic eligibility requirements for incoming freshmen and 2-year transfers. Modernize the recruiting rules. And continue to support the NCAA's efforts to improve the enforcement process. Taking each of these areas one at a time. In the area of benefits, the issue of providing student athletes with a full cost of attendance has been a conversation topic in recent months. Cost of attendance is not a term invented by conference commissioners, but it is an educationally based, commonly accepted standard that can be properly administered with each university's financial aid office. The first step is to develop a plan to provide these additional benefits to student athletes in an equitable manner through a redefined grant and aid program linked to the full cost of attendance. We recognize that this proposal may be a financial hardship on some, yet at the same time, economics cannot always be the reason to avoid doing what is in the best interest of our student athletes. As we review the cost of attendance, it is important to remember that we have been able to meet the needs of many student athletes through the NCAA Student Athlete Opportunity Fund for expenses not covered by scholarships. These include medical, travel, and emergency expenses, health insurance, clothing, and certain books and supplies not part of a scholarship. Increasing dollars allocated to this fund and encouraging schools to fully distribute the funds to student athletes can have an immediate and positive impact on meeting the needs of our young people. We should also have a national discussion on establishing athletic scholarships as multi-year awards, with full consideration of the implications associated with this model, including appropriate academic and behavioral conditions. Regardless of the reason student athletes leave early, whether they go pro because of academic struggles or for personal or other reasons, we want to keep the door open for those who want to come back and get their degree. We should consider extending the opportunity for student athletes to seek a baccalaureate degree through the provision of funding beyond the current permissible 6-year window for awarding athletic scholarships. We suggest extending the provision of these scholarships to ensure that former student athletes' access to educational resources and opportunities exist beyond the current 6-year NCAA limit. At this time last year, we were dealing with swirling media reports describing improper benefits provided to a few student athletes by some unscrupulous agents. Since that time, a working group has been put together, coordinated by the NCAA. This group consists of the NFL, the NFLPA, the American football coaches, the NCAA, attorneys general, agents, and a couple of us from conference offices. Progress has been made in identifying issues and some possible solutions to those issues, but the current NFLPA collective bargaining discussions have slowed us down, and we look forward to resuming this very important dialogue once those issues are resolved. Our goal is to give student athletes who aspire to become professionals the opportunity to receive expert advice they need on a timely basis. They should not need to seek advice from those who do not have their best interests at heart. It is important that we in the membership refocus our efforts on developing a regulatory approach that permits agents to better assist student athletes in a timely way with their aspirations as they make the transition to the pro ranks. At the same time, maintaining the prohibition on the provision of material benefits. That was item 1. 2. One of the most important discussion areas in this agenda is to advance new ways of evaluating freshman academic eligibility and to support proposed revisions to the 2-year college transfer model. To help high school seniors meet established NCAA academic eligibility standards, we should consider alternative strategies for determining whether freshmen can play in their first year or not. The existing approach of conducting a review of their credentials only at the end of high school is not always effective. A suggested approach is to include a full analysis of a prospect's academic performance throughout his or her high school career to give us a better picture and a more complete picture of the individual's preparation for college work. 3 components of this proposed strategy are: first, consider increasing the minimum GPA required for first-year athletic competition from a 2.0 to 2.5 in the 16 required core courses. Second, consider establishing an annual satisfactory progress rule at the high school level. This would require prospective student athletes to take and pass a required number of core courses in each of his or her 4 years prescribe the number of core courses each student athlete must successfully complete each year of high school. And this would avoid the last-minute effort of high school seniors when they finally realize what they need to do to become eligible to try to cram together too many core courses. Third, and this is important, this new model, if adopted, could result in the return of the partial qualifier category for certain enrolling freshmen. Specifically, prospects who meet the current academic standards for initial eligibility, but who fail to meet the proposed new standards I just outlined, would be permitted to enroll, receive aid, engage in limited practice during their freshman year, but they would not be permitted to compete until an academically successful year in residence was fulfilled at the institution. And while we look at these initial eligibility concepts, we are following the work of the Division I Academics Cabinet, and they're redefining the academic requirements governing the eligibility of two-year transfers in an effort to increase the expectation of their academic performance. And we certainly support that effort. Recruiting. It's time to push the reset button on the regulatory approach to recruiting in order to move away from the idea that recruiting rules are designed to create a level playing field. There are significant differences between institutions in resources, climate, tradition, history, stadiums, and fan interest, among many other things that make the idea of a level playing field an illusion. Rules governing text messaging and phone calls won't alter that fact. In early June, the SEC provided input on this issue when we forwarded correspondence to the NCAA to initiate discussion on some of these suggested changes. The result of the current legislative approach is to criminalize essentially harmless behavior, which draws attention and resources away from the kind of behavior we seek to deter. We suggest change in three areas. First, permit the effective use of personal and electronic communication between prospects and institutional staff members to include phone calls, text messaging, Facebook, Twitter, and other social media avenues, as well as other communication means yet to be developed. Second, rather than continuing a recruiting calendar with differing rules for off-campus recruiting activities, contact days, evaluation days, let's simply establish days on which it's permissible for coaches to engage in off-campus recruiting. So if a coach is permitted to travel off-campus to recruit, he or she should be allowed to evaluate and have a conversation with a prospect on the same day. Maybe we can make the so-called bump history. The only variance from this simplified approach is to retain the prohibition against recruiting contact throughout the day of a prospect's athletic contest. Third, we should encourage the adoption of rules to ensure that the recruitment of prospects is conducted within the secondary educational environment in the academy, while promoting the direct interaction between our coaches, prospects, and their families. We seek to hold the historic approach to recruiting through the scholastic setting, rather than through third parties and so-called handlers. For this reason, the SEC has submitted national legislation prohibiting institutions from hosting,